Hi, I'm Olivia. I'm the Witch of Wonderlust here on YouTube and on Instagram, and today I'm going to be talking to you about the second course of Hekate and kind of a little bit of my experience, what I got out of it. So strap in, grab yourself a cup of tea, and let's get started. Today I'm drinking this Vanilla Komaro by Harney and Sons Fine Teas. It's one of my favorite tea brands. So if you're just tuning in, if you're either new to my channel or new to this news about me working with Hekate, then I'll catch you up really quick. And if you already have seen the videos, you already know all that jazz, then you can skip all of this, and I'm sure I'll put like a timestamp either on the screen or in the description. Catch you up, I personally have never really worked with deities, nor were they anything that I was ever interested in adding to my practice. I was fairly content being just a folk practitioner, working with the herbs, the candles, the tools, and just working with my folk-based magic. So about a year ago, Jason Miller, who is a very well-known sorcerer, he wrote a few books that I highly recommend and I have made book reviews on, so if you want to check those out. He reached out to me and I had a little bit of a panic moment. He offered me his first Hekate course to me for free in exchange for an honest review. And knowing Jason, if I absolutely hated it and I still made a review, I think that he would appreciate the honesty and criticism, but I did take the course and I thoroughly enjoyed it. So you can watch the first video. I'm very vague about a lot of the things because there was a lot of personal things that was mixed in there. Unless you take the course, it's very hard to explain a lot of the things that he works us through, as well as there is an oath of secrecy. I'm going to try to explain to you a lot of the things that I learned and experienced without breaking the oath of secrecy, and also not telling you all of the ridiculous personal things that I experienced as well. So we're gonna try to do that. Now, moving forward, I did take that first course. I learned a ton. It was one of the hardest magical courses I've ever gone through, and I thought, wow, that was amazing. I'm gonna take the second course. So I took the second course. I thought the first one was difficult, and this one beat me into the ground and laughed at me. Yeah, it's intense. I learned so much though, and there were perspectives and ideas that I hadn't even thought of. There were ways to work with specific spirits and entities that I would have never even thought of or even understood how to do without taking this course. The trials that we go through, the rituals that we follow through, some of the beautiful rites that we are given are just, they're all a lot. And that doesn't sound good. It's overwhelming. I can definitely say that it's definitely overwhelming, because I think that I mentioned when I first started taking it, or right before I started taking the course, the first course, that I felt like a fifth grader going into a college course class and just being like, okay, good luck. Hope you understand everything. And I still feel that way. And it's just, there was just so much that I've never encountered, that I've never done. And the course is heavily ceremonial. It's so ceremonial and very mantric based. So things that I have never implemented into my own practice, things that I've read about but never put into practice. So that was a really, really interesting shift with my practice. Now, I will say what's interesting is I continued my personal practice, very folk-based and just how I usually would. And then the Hekate course was its separate entity. It did not really bleed into the rest of my practice, really. I'm trying to think if that's untrue or not. I don't, because I don't notice, I noticed there's a stark difference between the two. Because I had my folk practice, the thing that I was very connected and very familiar with and very comfortable with, and then the Hecatean course, which is completely out of my comfort zone and so ridiculously challenging for me. Those two are very hard to conjoin. So I don't think I really did. Now, I will say there are a few folk-based things that are involved in the Hecatean course. There are a few things that were little ideas that I felt that I could kind of mesh into my personal practice, just little more of ideas and tips or tricks or things of that sort, rather than full-blown practices that I could mesh, because the two are very difficult to put together. You can hear the clicking of my nails. Now, I will say I gained so much experience and so much knowledge in reaching out and working with entities and spirits that I never would have originally worked with or reached out to due to the stark difference of each practice. And I know that I mentioned this in the first video about the first course, that Jason takes the time to answer every single question that is sent through to him. So after he sends out a lesson, he will open a Q&A, and everybody in that course all ask questions, and he will go through every single one. So sometimes these Q&As are 30 minutes and sometimes they can be 3 hours, just depending on how many questions are asked and what kind of questions and the answers that he gives them. That's something that I personally really enjoyed about both courses, because it really helped me understand what other people were experiencing, the obstacles, the challenges, and also the successes that other people were experiencing, and asking Jason either validation questions or things to further extend on in order for them to understand better. I personally am one of those students who will sit in the back and not say anything. I'm very, very inactive in these classroom settings, but I personally just don't feel the need to. I like watching people post their Hekate altars or the ritual setup that they have for every new moon, things like that, or any tools or whatnot that they have put together, and you kind of get better ideas from all these different people in your class. And they're all very creative as well. You can get a little bit of suggestions and people bounce ideas off of each other, which I think is really cool. Both of these courses were some of the hardest fucking things that I've ever done. And the minimum is doing 100 mantras every single day, the minimum. So, and it sounds like a lot. Again, I mentioned this in the last one. It's just a very short mantra, Iyo Heka, Iyo Ho, every single day, 100 times. That's it. That's it. Granted, it's better if you perform other rites along with it every single day. But man, let me tell you, some of these days, it was the whole shebang, and I felt good about it, and I put all my energy and time into doing these rites. And then there's other days that it was 2 a.m., I'm leaning over, drunk in the shower, saying these mantras, just trying to get through it. And I will say it is an ass kicker in teaching dedication. It teaches you dedication, because holy crap, I figured, 100 mantras, I could do that. I don't know why. I don't know what it takes 5 minutes. 5 minutes. It takes 5 minutes. And there were days that I was like, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. And I don't know why. And it taught me a lot though, and it really kicked my ass. And working with Hekate has been very interesting because, like I said, I don't really work with deities. I don't really personally feel that I believe in any deities, but that's a personal perception. And working with a deity was a very, very different experience. And asking this deity for help in manifestations and help with different spiritual work, which was it really changed my perspective on a lot of the ways that I do my workings. I'd like to talk a little bit about my experience with working with Hekate outside of the course, because the second that I announced it, I got this flood of people so excited, and they were just so excited that I was working with the goddess that they worked with. And it seemed to me that a lot of these people had a very different perspective on who and what Hekate was compared to what I was experiencing. So that was a little interesting, because there was kind of a stark difference with the majority of people who worked with Hekate and my actual experience with her. I think when I say things like, oh, she's very authoritarian, she is a very stern teacher, I always think of the movie Whiplash. If you've ever seen that movie.
2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3.
Now, was I rushing or was I dragging? Count again.
1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3.
Are you one of those single tier people? Do I look like a double fucking rainbow to you?
The drummer, the teacher, is very stern, and I think of her like that, kind of like, you came here to learn, so you gonna learn. It's one of those things. She is not this warm, loving mother figure. She is a mother figure, but not cozy and warm and nurturing, really. And I heard a lot of that with a lot of the Hecatean community outside of this course. So I think it really depends on the perception of what you're working with this Didi for, maybe how you came into contact with her at the beginning. I'm not really sure why there was that stark difference, but it was just really interesting to see that stark difference, that fine line of what people perceived Hekate as. Further, something that I did notice was the second I started working with Hekate, a lot of people started giving her the credit for things that I had done. There's a lot of things that I did work with Hekate for, but none of it had to do with anything that I've ever posted on social media or anything that I would ever post on social media. So for example, I posted a video about when I was younger and I just started pole dancing, and then I became a pole teacher, I became a pole instructor, and somebody commented, oh, well, make sure to thank Hekate for that because she did that. And I said, no, she didn't, I did that. The time that I became a pole teacher, that was 3 years prior to me taking the course and even making contact with Hekate. So I noticed that not only with me, but with other people who work with Hekate, whereas they would say, you know, oh, well, Hekate gave me this job. And then I'd be curious, like, what kind of working did you do and what kind of ritual did you do to ask her for the aid? And they said, oh, no, she just always does those things for me. And that experience is not something that I had. So I wanted to know more about that relationship, how it seemed like there was a stronger connection with these people and Hekate compared to me, where I felt very student teacher, which I enjoyed. I really liked that that fine line of student teacher. So that is just something that I found really interesting, that I don't really see this at all with secular practices, but with Didi practices, I find a lot of the time it's newer practitioners or people who are new to Didi worship or Didi or people who are new to deity work, that they often give the deity credit for things that they may have done. Now, this is not to say that your deity did not help you, because if you reached out and you asked, then there is a possibility, or a very large possibility, that they did work with you and they did answer and they did help you with that working and that manifestation. Whereas with the example that I gave, and of course I think this person just was excited that I was working with Hekate and, you know, was like, oh, thank her also. Like, I don't think that they meant it in any other way, but it is interesting to see that they're so easy to just hand off big accomplishments off to the work of a higher being rather than just the hard work of yourself. And like I said, there's a huge scale, so I'm not saying it's one or the other all the time. What I am saying is it's not all or other, right? It's not just the deity doing all the work and me asking for everything from this deity and not doing any of the work in order to get to my place, but it's also not only me doing the work most of the time, right? So I thought that was a really interesting perspective shift the second I started working with Hekate, because a lot of people would tell me that, oh, make sure to thank her for this thing, when she really had nothing to do with a particular outcome or manifestation. Now, granted, she did have a lot to do with certain outcomes and manifestations in my own personal life that I did reach out to her, and I got some really interesting and very abrupt manifestations, and that was very cool to witness. So that being said, Jason does have yet another course, the third Hecatean course that is after this second one. Or am I going to continue to work with Hekate just on my own? And the answer is neither. Some of you were like, the thing is, deity work has never been something that worked for me. Well, it seems that it works for a lot of people, and I thoroughly enjoyed both of these courses. I learned so much. Put into practice things, I learned things that I never would have done or understood or learned if I didn't take these courses. So don't get me wrong, I'm so glad. I appreciate Jason so much for putting these very in-depth, lengthy, and very heavily informed and dense courses together in order to get the most out of your practice, especially depending on what you put into it. I really appreciate the things that I learned through both Jason and the classroom setting and also working with Hekate herself, but it's just not for me. It's just not something that ever connected with me. I've never really connected with Hekate on a personal sense. Her and I just don't click. in a lot of ways that I think other people do connect with her. While I appreciate her and think that she's a wonderful deity and has so much to offer, just not for me. Now, I think it's important that you should try things that are out of your comfort zone, that maybe you seem a little overwhelmed with, or that you're not sure if you're ready for. And I think that it's totally fine to kind of dip your toe in. Okay, well, the course was a little more than dipping your toe in, but I think it's fine to experience and to learn and to put to practice things that you normally would never incorporate into your practice in order to understand something at a more personal and deeper level. Now, I know that I'm coming away from these courses and coming away from working with Hekate with so much more knowledge and so much more that I can implement into my craft in so many other ways. I definitely got creative with a lot of the things that I learned in the course, and I'm sure there are habits that I'm going to keep up. The dedication kicked my ass, and I know that I keep saying that, but it just, God, there were days that it was just so hard. And there were days that I missed and I had to make it up, and I was sorry for it. Yeah, it was really cool. And it's definitely an experience that I would absolutely never give up for the world. It was a rough one, and it was also an amazing one. So I'm really, really thankful that Jason reached out to me for the initial course, and thank you for letting me take both courses. Thank you for having me. Thank you for all the answers that you sat down and gave your personal thought to every Q&A. Yeah, it was a fantastic course. And if deity work, if ceremonial magic is your kind of thing, then this would be a great course for you. I think you would really enjoy it. Again, it is very devoted. So it's not a course it's not like a Skillshare course, right? You don't just like, oh, I'm just gonna kind of browse through this and see if I can do this piece and maybe that project. Like, you need to carve out the time for this. It cannot be in a time of your life that you are so busy. So when I was working 3 jobs a few years ago and just trying to sustain myself so that I could buy groceries, this would have been, I mean, this obviously would have not been something that I would prioritize, nor would it be something that I would have time or energy to put into. So I do think that there is that kind of trade-off. But if you do end up finding yourself in a situation and in a place that you do have a little bit of that time and you do have energy to put into something like this, I would do it. Even as a mere folk practitioner who does not work with deities, it opened me up to so many things, and I think my practice will evolve from this, and I'm really, really grateful for that. So that is my update on the Hecatean courses that I took. I think the 2 courses is gonna be a huge timestamp in my practice, and I'm gonna look back on it when I'm just, you know, a wrinkly old witch lady, and I'm gonna look back on it with a lot of affection, and I think it's going to be a big turning point on how I see and understand and practice things. So thank you again, Jason, for putting together the course and for allowing me to take the courses with you. I'll leave a link down below. Like I said, it's a 7-month course. It's very, very in-depth, and I know I keep saying it, but it is very dedicated and very heavy. So keep that in mind. It's basically like taking a high-level college class, but for magic people. Very professional. But that's all I have for you today. I hope that you enjoyed, and as always, best of luck, be kind to each other, and may your gods treat you as you've treated others. Bye. Oh, and Io Hekate.